Welcome to How to Be a Texan. This is Kyle and
I'm Kevin.
Oh, good. All right. Well, good.
I never know what level of radio voice you're going to kick in when we start one of these.
This is
so I'm
level
always
10.
No, this is not. This is like level 2.
Oh, okay.
Level
okay.
10 is just like extreme.
Yeah.
So I'm always sitting here on pins and needles waiting for the intro.
Can we hear a level 10 just real fast?
No,
radio voice?
I don't think I've got it in
Level
me.
10 is like, hey there, welcome to How to Be a Texan. My name is Kevin Holder, and I'm here with my buddy Kyle Turpatrick.
Turd Patrick.
Turd Patrick.
And then you hear like,
Yeah. Oh, my
sound
gosh.
effects.
There's usually
Yeah.
some finger pointing going on.
Oh my God, I'm not doing that. Okay, so today, Kevin, I thought we'd talk about the origin and the overall just kind of history of the cattle trails and the cattle drives. I thought we'd talk about that just for fun and not just belabor it, not go into so much detail that just bores people to tears, but just talk about it because it's a huge part of Texas history, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was all around kind of the mid-1850s through the late 1800s, right when the frontier was really settling in. And we desperately needed, this is post-Civil War. So think about 1860s is when the Civil War occurred and ended. Mm-hmm. And so the nation was in chaos. We had all these cattle that had been bred down in Texas, all through Texas. And there was really no way to get the cattle back east because the railroads had not come all the way through to Fort Worth and to San Antonio yet.
Where did the railheads?
Well, they mainly occurred over through the Missouri and Kansas. That's where the railheads had gotten to, and they were safe and secure passages. But the problem was they just hadn't made it down through, say, Little Rock or Fort Worth or San Antonio. Think about that line down. Mm-hmm. They just hadn't made it that far down. They'd made it to New Orleans, but for some reason, I don't know if it was boggy or what, but we didn't drive cattle over to the east to New Orleans to get on ships and then go up to New England. Somehow it was known that we just needed to get the cattle back east because there was a huge demand for beef. There was plenty of beef up in mid-America, the Midwest, but there wasn't as much beef as they needed, and we had an inordinate amount of beef down in really bred through Mexico and then ultimately kind of came up through Texas, and we had some massive ranches in Texas, the King Ranch down south, and then all these other ranches that came up, and so we had millions of head, and a lot of them were Longhorns back in the day, right? And ultimately they got kind of rebred off of the Longhorn. But there were millions of those, and we needed to get them up to the east, and the only way to do that was through these railheads. Mm-hmm. And so that was really the origin of why we had these cattle trails. Now, I'm sure our fact checker is probably going to bust me on some of the dates.
Oh, yeah, he will. He's been waiting for this episode. Guarantee you.
Yeah. Let's talk through that. So, and you know what? And we've talked about and go back and listen to our Lonesome Dove episode as well, because Lonesome Dove was fascinating, and I won't belabor it, but it goes back into Gus and McCrae drove this, and this is fictitious, but based on Goodnight and Loving, what they did, and they drove this first herd up and settled a big cattle ranch in Montana. That was really the premise of Lonesome Dove. So go back and listen to that. We did an episode on that. But what happened was, that's the history of this, is that we had all these millions of cattle. It was post-Civil War, and we needed to get all this beef back east. And so what generated was there were really 4 cattle trails that came out. And those 4 cattle trails, so let me make sure I get this right. You've got the Chisholm Trail, which was really the original. Then you had the Shawnee Trail. Then you had the Great Western Trail. And then you had the Goodnight Loving Trail. And those occurred again back around 1867 through really the late 1800s, closer to 1900. And let me give you a little pop quiz here. Tell me the reasons that shut down cattle drives.
That shut them down?
That closed it off, that just absolutely shut it down. And there's 3 reasons in my mind that did it.
Well, the rails came down to Fort Worth.
That's one. And all the way to San Antonio.
And San Antonio.
Right.
I don't know. Besides that, what else?
Barbed wire.
Oh, barbed wire.
Barbed wire.
Yeah.
That was probably the biggest one. And then the third were all these kind of hordes of cattle baron. Well, they're really kind of paid hands for cattle barons up in Kansas and Missouri that were paid to shut down cattle drives because of this yellow fever. It was really called the Texas fever. There was a belief that the Texas cattle had some kind of a virus that they called the Texas virus that would infect their herds and kill their herds. And so they would pay hired gunmen to go and basically kill.
But they just rerouted the trails around them, right?
So that's what ended up happening.
Yeah.
That's why
they didn't really kill it. They just kind of had to.
They had to
reroute
reroute and go further west.
Yeah.
And so that's what really the Chisholm Trail kind of went up through Missouri, and then you had the others, the Shawnee, the Great Western, and the Goodnight Loving that kind of kept on going further out, and then they kind of went up to these southern Kansas railheads and Abilene and other kind of ports for the trains, and that's where they ended up getting to. But what I thought is we would just really describe kind of what was life like on the cattle trail for these, young men. These were young men that were. Can you imagine? You're driving, this group of, and they were generally around 2,500 cattle that they would take at a time. So I just got through watching this John Wayne movie, and it's called Red River. And you think of John Wayne as always the hero. Well, he turned out to be the villain in this. He was a hero for a while, and then he literally kind of just lost his mind and became the villain. And the younger guy that was in charge really had to take over and cast him out.
What made him lose his mind? You get that cattle fever or something?
No, he ended up, and so they were ones that the Red River is all about the vision that John Wayne had, and it took him 15 years basically to go and develop a big herd down in South Texas, and then do the first drive up. Now I don't know, fact checker, you'll have to tell me, but I think it was basically up the Great Western Trail, and it wasn't a great movie. When you look at Lonesome Dove, it was a fabulous movie with great character development and all this. Red River was, it was of course way a long time ago done, and it was choppy and cheesy and all that, but it was good in that John Wayne's character basically got so power hungry to just say it's my way or the highway he basically just kind of lost his way. And he started making really, really bad decisions about, well, if you're going to do this, I'm basically going to kill you, And finally, the young man, who he considered kind of his pseudo-son, just said, you're out. Get out of here, And so he ran him off. And then he came back at the end. We brought some men, and it was a big showdown at the end. And then they ended up, making up at the end and not killing each other, which was sweet. So sorry to ruin the movie for you if you haven't watched Red River yet. But well, the movie's 50 years old, so it's not like
I know that's why that was funny.
Yeah. So
I was gonna go watch it, man.
Well, you should. It was good. I mean, I watched it, on the treadmill or whatever, and it was something to watch. So, okay, so Kevin, what do you think about cattle drive so far?
I think they're pretty amazing.
Yeah,
and I'm really curious what life was like on the trail.
Really. So how would you like, first of all, just tell me, how would you like sleeping on the ground?
No, I mean, they were really roughing it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just like, they would literally just set up camp.
Yeah.
Get up the next day, go, I don't even know how many miles they could go in a day. How many miles could they go in a day?
About 8 to 10.
8 to 10?
Mm-hmm.
Are you sure about that?
Positive.
Wow.
At best, they could go 15 miles in one day.
So you go 15 miles, then you camp again, and then 15 miles camp again.
This was generally
and these are going all the way up the country.
This is at least 100-day journey, at least, to get 2,500 cattle from Texas to Abilene, Kansas.
Yeah, that's brutal.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
8 to 10 miles, and think about the river crossings, and you had to plan for those. So especially if you had a rain, you had to anticipate that, and you're sending scouts ahead. So, I mean, think about it also, you have to be very tough because, I mean, they're going through Indian country too. So so they've got all kinds of Indian attacks that occur, and some of them failed and got killed because there were Indian attacks and they killed all the cowboys and they took all the beef.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that'd be bad.
Mm-hmm.
But just the theory of riding a horse, whatever, 1,000 miles, and sleeping on the dirt.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
How would you like that?
And I guess they had the. How did they manage the food?
They just ate a cow. Every day they would eat a cow. They'd cut it up and put it in there was a chuck wagon.
Holy crap!
No, I'm not
there
kidding.
was a chuck wagon. I don't think they cut up a cow every day though.
They did.
Literally every day they butchered a new cow.
Well, I mean, they kept what they could in the chuck wagon, but it would only keep for so many days, and then they'd have to butcher another cow.
I think maybe they had like dry goods or something like that.
Maybe so, but I'm not kidding. That was
maybe
one of that movie.
Chucky was out there making beans or something.
No, there were probably beans.
Butcher a new cow.
There was
every
beans,
day.
and then there was fights over if they had.
Fact checker's gonna roast you on that one.
I don't think so. I don't think so. So watch Red River, and that was the biggest complaint that those cowboys had day after day. Is like, what are we eating? We're eating beef stew again, and they just got to where
I'm sure they ate beef a lot, but I don't think they butchered a whole cow every single day.
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They would eat beef.
Yeah, I believe that part.
And
I just don't know if they butcher
sick.
a cow every single day.
Well,
I mean, cow's a lot of meat.
Well, maybe they wouldn't.
Cow is a lot. To give you context, how many people would be?
Well, I mean,
Like
think about it.
being in
You've
a
got,
group.
yeah, so you would have, I've got facts on this. So you would have in that, you're probably going to have 10 or so cow hands, and then you're going to have a cook, you're going to have a drover, you're going to have dragmen, and dragmen were by far the kind of the lowest on the totem pole there.
Do you have definitions on these roles? What's a dragman?
A dragman is the one that would stay in the back and and kind of clean the herd up, keep them all in. And but that was by far the worst position because think about the dust that 2,500 cattle would kick up.
Right.
And so that's why you always saw them in handkerchiefs and bandanas and all.
Now, what's a drover?
A drover, that's one of the guys on the side that's really keeping the lead going, the kind of the tip of the spear, and a lot of times you would have some bulls up front that would be leading, and you'd be making sure they're going, and everything else would follow that.
Follow
lead.
them. So you got to make sure they stayed on the path.
That's right, and then
Up front.
you'd have a cook in the chuck wagon, and they would stay. The drovers and the cooks would stay up front with the chuck wagons. And they would go up, and then you'd have the dragman literally cleaning up the dregs. That's what they would call it, where you've got the outliers out, and you would have an acceptable loss rate along because if you had stampedes, I mean, think about that. You know, if you had 2,500 cows at stampede, you're going to have a loss. You know, and you just hope that it's limited.
So now that I think about it, because I was thinking like 10, 12 guys, like one full-grown cow would last them like 6 months. Just throw it in the refrigerator. And then I was like, wait, they don't have refrigerators.
Nah.
So they're probably...
They're just cutting up.
They're probably going to have to...
parts.
Yeah.
They'll just get what they can off, make stew out of it, and keep going.
Every week or so? I
would
don't know.
think so. I would think so.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good topic to research.
I don't know. I'm just telling you.
Beef management.
They had plenty of beef there, and
what if they killed 100 cattle? I mean, one a day would be 100.
Right.
That'd be kind of extreme. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah. But
yeah, they'd lose all the cattle in there.
they'd lose 100.
Well, no, they had 1,000. You know, I don't know.
They had 2,500.
2,500.
They ate 100.
It's like that movie Dumb and Dumber where they kept taking money out of the briefcase. Have you seen that movie?
Oh yeah.
And by the end there's nothing left in the briefcase but an IOU.
Yeah.
It's like, sorry, we ate all the cattle.
No. That doesn't make any sense. My favorite part of that.
We owe you 100 cattle. We ate them. Oh my gosh!
My favorite part by far is when that guy uses the bathroom. And she's like, "Oh no, don't use that." Oh my gosh, so great.
All right, well, we'll do some fact checking on.
Yeah, and then along with that, I'm sorry I missed this, but they'd have about 10 cowboys a cook, and then they would generally have a horse wrangler or two because you would have a remuda of horses along with that.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, and so if you have 2,500 cattle, then you're going to bring probably at least 2 or 3 mounts per cowboy, and they would go through probably 2 or 3 horses a day, and then they would let the other 2 rest, and then those 3 they'd keep fresh, because you're constantly riding off and kind of herding in the strays. And then
what about security? Were there any guys that were there just to fight off Indians? And
no, they all were. They all were. So they would take
shifts
shifts at night to watch the herd, and then they had a lot of Irish cowboys in there too. You'll see that, and those guys were really, because you'll hear them yodeling or singing to the cows, and that I'm not kidding, they would literally kind of calm the cows by singing to the cows. And but your most feared thing would be if it was deadly quiet, and again, this happened in that Red River movie where it was just deadly quiet, and you had some pans clanging, and it caused a stampede. And that's the worst thing. But can you imagine, at midnight, a stampede occurs, everybody gets on your horses, and you're riding 45 miles an hour through pitch black country. Can you imagine that?
That'd be scary.
Oh, my gosh, that would be so frightening.
That'd be scary.
Your horse could break a leg, you could fall and break your neck.
Just because the cook dropped a pan.
That's right. And that's what happened. And again, it was, but it would easily happen. That would be, one of their biggest things is just trying to keep the herd calm. But I love that. It's a big part of our history. And so that 40 years or so, we had cattle trails, that were they had to be established first, which was pretty remarkable in some of these, kind of heroes of the cattle era, like O.W. Wheeler, and then, some of these others that really developed these 4 cattle trails. And it's a big part of Texas history. And then it just came to a screeching end because of, primarily the barbed wire, and then the railheads that came into Texas. And then you would just drive your cattle to San Antonio, you drive them to Houston, you drive them to San Antonio. Fort Worth, and then you'd be good. Or Amarillo was a big head too.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, it's probably pretty unpleasant with the horses eating all that beefarino.
Beefarino.
They'd get pretty gassy.
They would get gassy.
Pretty gassy. Yeah. No,
that beefarino.
So the interesting thing is these 4 trails. One of the reasons
they didn't have Price Club or giant cans of beefarino that they were feeding.
Oh, okay. I was just thinking all that beef.
Yeah,
cow a day.
Yeah.
Horses eat grass.
Horses generally.
You generally would not feed your horse beefarino.
Yeah, it's more.
Maybe if it was pulling a happy. What's the wagon called?
I can't remember.
Chuck wagon?
No, not a Chuck wagon. He's talking about a Seinfeld episode.
Oh god,
he's off on a Seinfeld episode.
Kramer fed his horse beefarino, and he took George's parents on a carriage ride, and
no,
it was carriage ride the whole time.
Carriage ride through Central Park, and
with a carnivore horse.
Well, yeah, Kramer had fed the horse beefarino because he overbought at Price Club. And so they're riding along, and the horse is just super gassy.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, my God, too.
Oh, no.
That's what he's talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, he's not serious about feeding the horses the beef.
I didn't know.
Cattle drive.
I didn't. Okay. But I will tell you, those 4 trails.
Handsome Cab. That's what it was called. Handsome Cab, right?
They were extremely wide because they would graze as they were going their 8 to 10 miles per day. The cows would fan out across a very wide berth because they'd basically be grazing all the way up to Kansas. And that's how they ate because, to the beefarino point, they would be eating grass all the way up.
Right.
And that's how they fed themselves.
Yeah.
So there you go.
There you go.
So anyway, hey, I like that stuff. As y'all know,
what was the most traveled of the cattle trails?
Oh, it easily had to be the Chisholm Trail. So that's the one that went up through Kansas into Missouri, and then you just had to kind of keep ooching over as the mobs kept attacking the herds, and then you went. Then you went Shawnee Trail, and then you went Great Western, and then you kind of swung out New Mexico up through Colorado back into Kansas on the Goodnight Loving. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which trail was the Lonesome Dove? story.
To me, I believe it was the Great Western. Fact checker can get me, but I'm pretty sure it was the Great Western because it was the one that was back over, and they had to cross all these rivers to get up through it. And it wasn't the one going back up through Oklahoma, Arkansas, up to Missouri. It was the one that kind of went up through the Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma Panhandle, into Kansas, and then ultimately up to Montana. Mm-hmm. And they didn't go over to the mountains, which the Goodnight Lovings. They skimmed right over along the mountains of the Rockies.
Got it.
Yeah, pretty cool. Hey, I love this stuff. I mean, I love all that. I think. Can you imagine the shape that those Cowboys were in, just being on horseback all day long? I mean, it was amazing. They had to be in amazing shape, just lean and fit and tough, and able to. And all they're eating is beef and beans and whatever. Anyway, it's a fascinating era for us, and I love that part of Texas history.
It's hard to believe it was only 40 years.
Yeah,
I mean, because Texas is so defined by it.
It is, but it really ended.
Just a small window of time.
It really ended. Now you have to pay for, a Howdy Doody ranch out in Arizona or something to go and do a mock cattle drive.
Howdy Doody.
Yeah, I mean, people pay big money to do that and go drive them, a mile on a ranch, and it's like, oh wow, this is awesome.
Yeah.
But I bet it would be awesome.
Yeah.
For us, it would still be awesome.
Yeah.
Moving cattle around. My daughter, that's one of her favorite things to do is move cows around on her horses.
Uh-huh.
And it's amazing how instinctual it is for a horse.
Oh, yeah.
You think these cutting horses, they have all this specialized training. And a cutting horse is that's the one where you'll have a cow up basically against a fence line. And there's these competitions where the rider on the horse will move the cow whichever way they want, and they're judged on how kind of as one the rider and the horse do, and how in control of that cow they are, and it's phenomenal.
Well, you got to cut it out of the herd and then keep it out of the herd.
Right.
Yeah.
It's beautiful to see.
Yeah. Yeah, those horses are amazing.
And you talk about the balance that the people riding, Cowboys or Cowgirls are riding. I mean, they are hanging on for dear life because that horse will cut on a dime. Mm-hmm. And I mean, turn and go full blast the other way to cut that cow back
those
out.
horses are amazing.
They are amazing. And high dollar, too. Mm-hmm. That's an expensive hobby.
Yep, it is.
All right, well, hey, thanks for listening along on my ramblings on the cattle trails.
That was good stuff.
Yeah, I enjoy that. Beefarino.
Beefarino, Andrew.
I don't care much about the beefarino, but whatever. It's all good. It's all good. So,
all right. Well, look us up on iTunes, Spreaker, Google Play. Leave a review.
Right.
Adios.
Adios. See you later.